than the legendary sitar maestro, Ustad Shujat Hussain Khan.
Of course, my congratulations to all the awardees tonight. Make us and everyone in India very proud. To Outlook, specifically, I want to thank them because by taking a part of this evening and putting a little music there, it's something that is a big part of our tradition. ये हमारे परंपरा की बहुत एक अहम चीज है. कोई भी चीज खूबसूरत हो रही हो, इसमें कहते हैं ना कि थोड़ा सा मीठा हो जाए, तो उसी तरह एक something, a little music, something to do with your art form, something before or a part of the evening is a very nice thing, and I'm very grateful that companies, conglomerates, and people are thinking about this nowadays. I'm not going into largely classical piece today, as we are running on a perfect time schedule. Two small compositions, a little folk and a little Sufi, going on to a classical piece just to end. So I'll put it all together, just to give you a thought process. Ek dafa sham shuru kare. With me on the tabla today is Amjad Saab and Arunanshu Chaudhary ji. चलूं सजना मैं तेरे संग कैसे चलूं सजना तू समंदर है मैं साहिलों की समंदर है साहिलों की हवा मैं तेरे संग कैसे चलूं सजना तू समंदर है साहिलों की तू बहारों की खुशबू हरी छाँव है बहारों की खुशबू हरी छाँव मैं सितारा तेरा जिंदगी की अमानत तेरा नाम है तू सहारा मेरा सारी खुदाई तुझको चुना मैंने सारी खुदाई तुझको चुना तू समंदर साहिलों की हवा सितारे भी चलने लगे। तू चला तो सितारे भी चलने लगे, आंसुओं की तरह ख्वाब पे ख्वाब आंखों में जलने लगे, आंसुओं की तरह, आंसुओं की तरह। मैंने सारी खुदाई तुझको चुना, मैंने सारी खुदाई तुझको चुना। तू समंदर साहिलों की बड़ी अच्छी दोस्त हैं, शायरा हैं, बड़ी सिंपल चीजें हैं बट मुझे पसंद आते हैं। भुलाने में जिनको जमाने लगे हैं, भुलाने में जिनको जमाने लगे हैं, वही आज मुझको याद आने लगे हैं। जमाने लगे हैं, भुलाने में जिनको जमाने लगे हैं, वही आप मुझे याद आने लगे हैं, भुलाने में। मेरे गम पे वो मुस्कुराने लगे हैं, मेरे गम पे वो मुस्कुराने लगे हैं, मेरे गम पे वो मुस्कुराने लगे हैं, मजे अब मोहब्बत के आने लगे हैं। तुझे प्यार यूं हम जताने लगे हैं, तुझे प्यार यूं हम जताने लगे हैं, तुझे प्यार यूं हम जताने लगे हैं, तू रूठा नहीं पर मनाने लगे हैं। once again. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your patience. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. बहुत शुक्रिया. Now we can go.
Part of their commitment to work with devotion. So for a more empowered Indian society based on strong foundation of morals, values and culture. So ladies and gentlemen, to talk more about the Kanoria vision and commitment, I'd like to call on stage Mr. Hemant Kanoria, Trustee Kanoria Foundation, Chairman and Managing Director, Shrey Infrastructure Finance Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Hemant Kanoria.
Mr. Raheja, Mr. Ramchandran, Mr. Roy, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to all of you. It is indeed a pleasure for us to be associated with the Outlook Group for the Speakout Awards. Vinod Mehta Memorial Lecture is a wonderful initiative to honor achievers from different walks of life who have had the courage to dream big and the conviction and determination to achieve it. All of them have made an incredible contribution to the society. I would like to compliment Mr. Ramachandran and his team for conceptualizing an event like this, which is befitting a tribute to the brand of journalism that Sri Mehta espoused during his lifetime. In fact, the entire Outlook Group has been the flag bearer of such courageous journalism, and the group carries forward that Sri Mehta's legacy. I've had the good fortune of knowing Sri Mehta well. Never shying away from calling a spade, Sri Mehta was the epitome of courage, honesty, transparency, qualities which we at Kanoria Foundation wholeheartedly value and endorse. Thus, it was a natural choice for us to get associated with this edition of the first of the Vinod Mehta Memorial Lecture and the Speakout Awards. Courage is a virtue, but it should not be confused with recklessness. Our ancient scriptures teach us to forego recklessness and to behave responsibly. We should never hesitate to take actions which are in the long-term interest of the nation, which result in sustainable and inclusive growth, which empower people to become self-reliant. We at Kanoria Foundation follow this philosophy, and all our business ventures aim to make a positive contribution to the society. We have been quite fortunate in the last 28 years back, when we forayed into the infrastructure sector. We have been in the last 2 decades been able to contribute in our own humble manner to the society by participating in financing those companies and construction companies and contractors who were very small. Mechanization was not introduced in India. And that was the time that we started off financing the infrastructure space. Today we have close to about 90,000 customers in this segment, who are the second largest employers after agriculture in our country. So we feel that we have been privileged to get this opportunity of contributing in our own humble way to the country. The second initiative which we took about 10 years back was in the villages, by creating the village-level entrepreneurs. And we started off from the eastern part of India. About 65,000 centers we have created in the villages, which are run by the village-level entrepreneurs, and who provide services to about 500 million people in the rural areas in Bihar, Bengal, Odisha, and many other states in the northeastern part of the country. which we always regard as the poorer part of the country. So we got an opportunity to participate in that. Similarly, we have been involved in many other initiatives in the infrastructure space, and we feel that infrastructure is one big way of contributing to society in our own way. What we have also done is about 6-7 years back, we created our own foundation, and all our businesses were folded into the foundation, which is a trust. And whatever money comes into the foundation, we, as per our scriptures, so we have learned that 80% is redeployed into businesses because that help, again, to give back to society in our own way. And 10% is given to the needy, and that is through the social impact initiatives. And we have distributed a folder which is there on every table, that what we do on the social impact initiatives. We try to cover the body, mind, and soul, all three, in our own way. So these are small things which we are doing. Even in the business side of it, what we always are cognizant of and try to achieve through the initiatives in the business is the 5 elements that we always keep in mind. One is the customer, because for every business, the customer is the most important person. Then it is the employees, because they deliver to the customers, so the welfare of the employees, taking care of them. The third are the investors, because without that the business will not prosper or survive. The fourth is the society, and the fifth, the planet. And for the planet, we have learned from our scriptures again that maintenance of the planet in a proper manner is something which we have to pass on to the future generations, and we are a custodian. So the entire concept at Kanoria Foundation is of a custodianship, that we are the custodians. Whatever we have, we should see that how we can share it well. We think that India, and because of being in so many businesses, so many areas, and being a part of the infrastructure initiative of the country, we have seen how it has made a dramatic difference in the lives of people. Going forward, we think that 3 important things that we need to carry forward for creating a sustainable country: empowering people through entrepreneurship, so creating more entrepreneurs in the country, and that has been one of our initiatives through whether contractors that we have been working with, or we have been working with the village level entrepreneurs. We have also started a new concept on agro-entrepreneurs now. So this is the way that we think, because India is a great nation of entrepreneurs, and that is what we are trying to see, that how we can partner with them, promote them, and the government is also playing a good role in that. It can do always better. The second element is also on the infrastructure creation, because infrastructure creation is must, otherwise it will not be in a position to connect people. Whether it is power, roads, ports, railways, everything is infrastructure related, and that plays a very important role in any country. And the third very important part is agriculture. We still need to make strides in mechanization in the agriculture sector, because most of the younger people in agriculture, they are moving out. By mechanization, we'll increase the production, we'll increase the income in the hands of the people. And these are certain elements which we are working on, and going forward, we feel that we should be in a position to again contribute in a humble way. I feel that these can form the basis of sustainable India, and these areas have immense potential to create new avenues for entrepreneurship. And who knows, maybe in some years' time, at this forum, we will be awarding people who have made successful ventures from these fields. With this, let me conclude and thank the Outlook Group once again for giving me this opportunity to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kanoria. I'd now like to invite on stage Mr. Indranil Roy, CEO, Outlook Group, to say a few words. Mr. Roy, can I please request you to join us on stage? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Roy.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Outlook was launched in 1995. That's been 22 years back. At its launch, Outlook redefined the magazine business in India. Today is the day to remember the man who redefined Indian magazines. It is a moment of pride for all of us at Outlook to be a part of the team to launch the Vinod Mehta Memorial Lecture and Outlook Speakout Awards. Both stands as a tribute to Mr. Vinod Mehta, the man, the editor, and the value he stood for. What next is the obvious question. 22 years hence, digital has redefined content distribution, content discovery, and content consumption behavior. Digital has challenged us and will challenge us further. We have to embrace digital as an opportunity. Digital and social media have given publishers like us a huge opportunity to distribute content to a very large target audience faster and wider. Today's event is actually a perfect example of distribution and reach of content. Till now, our campaign to promote this event has reached 10 million estimated eyeballs only through digital. The content we generate in the next 2 hours will not be confined within the 300 people in this room. We will publish the content deferred live from 8 p.m. onwards on our digital assets, Facebook and Periscope, which will reach to a discerning readership base of around 300,000 people across the world. That's the distribution opportunity that digital has created for us. We have to embrace the technological shift, learn to coexist, learn to create new business models, and redefine our businesses. However, the most critical differentiator will always be content, and Outlook will always continue to focus on delivering credible content. With this promise, I thank all of you once again to accepting our invitation and to be here with us on a day we are so very proud of. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I'd like to now request Mr. Rajesh Ramachandran, Editor-in-Chief Outlook, to introduce one of our guests and speakers for this evening, Mr. Steve Coll, 2-time Pulitzer winner. And I'd like to request Mr. Ramachandran to come on stage and do the honors, please.
Honorable former Vice President of India, Mr. Hamid Ansari, ladies and gentlemen, is Vinod Mehta the greatest Indian editor ever? Well, we have for long debated this. I don't know whether there will ever be an answer to that question, but I believe that definitely Vinod is one of the greatest ever editors of this country. We lost him on 8th of March 2015, and ever since we have wanted to celebrate his life and work. That is how we thought about an annual event, a lecture by an eminent journalist, and also about relaunching Speakout Awards, which Vinod had initiated in 2005. From Debonair to Outlook, through Independent, Sunday Observer, and Pioneer, Vinod created history every time he launched a newspaper or a magazine. He never had the luxury of editing one of the 4 big newspapers, Times of India or Express or Hindu or Hindustan Times. Each time he had to create the brand and then establish it. No wonder he is an icon for all of us. So we have here another iconic journalist to deliver the inaugural Vinod Mehta Memorial Lecture. Steve Coll is no stranger to journalists across the English reading world. He is now the Dean of the Graduate School of Journalism at the Columbia University and also a staff writer at the New Yorker, where he writes on national security and intelligence agencies. He was managing editor of Washington Post from 1998 to 2005 and was earlier its South Asia bureau chief here in Delhi. His breadth of work is absolutely stunning, from Wall Street to international insurgency. He won his first Pulitzer Prize in 1990 for a series of articles which he wrote along with his colleague David Weiss about the Securities and Exchanges Commission. Then the investigative book, about which we are all aware of, Ghost Wars, The Secret History of the CIA, Afghanistan, and Bin Laden, from the Soviet invasion to September 10, 2001. This book brought him his second Pulitzer in 2005. The Bin Ladens, an American family in the American century, fetched him the Penn John Kenneth Galbraith Award for nonfiction. Private Empire, ExxonMobil, and American Power, On the Grand Trunk Road, A Journey into South Asia, Eagle on the Street, The Taking of Getty Oil, and The Deal of the Century, The Breaking of AT&T are his other books. I invite Steve Coll to deliver the inaugural Vinod Mehta Memorial Lecture.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. Thanks to everyone at the Outlook Group for having me out here. I always relish an occasion to come back to Delhi, and I hope I can make the next half an hour or so entertaining as well as thought-provoking. I really enjoyed rereading Vinod Mehta's work in preparing for this, and it's, of course, a great honor to be selected to deliver the first lecture in his memory. I was even the last few days reading his memoir, Lucknow. Boy, I don't know how many of you have had a chance to read it, but I recommend it. It has a certain character about it that I really admire in the great journalist. He's not full of himself. He's full of humor, full of life, full of curiosity, very conversational, very accessible. And that, I think, is sometimes what it takes to reach audiences. And that sensibility, on the other hand, was quite a serious one, very devoted to public interest journalism. Of course, all of us outside of India admire Outlook very much as an exemplar of the very best journalism in this country. As Rajesh mentioned, I lived out here for 3 years over in Vasant Vihar as the Washington Post correspondent. I came out as a young journalist, really fired up to be out here and to work. I lived here between 1989 and 1992, and it was a time of considerable change in India and Indian politics. I think I covered 4 governments in 3 years. I may be one of the few Americans who knows that Chandrasekhar was, in fact, the Prime Minister of India. It may have only been for 7 weeks, but it was an exciting time, a disturbing time, and a time of beginnings for the India that I enjoy coming back to today. I remember very much in Vasant Vihar the cable television wars. Some of you may remember those. When cable first arrived in a slightly unruly state, there'd be a knock on your door. Some thuggish-looking man would say, "I'm here to install your cable." You'd negotiate the terms. He'd install the cable. About a week later, you'd hear a rustling out in the trees, some shouting in the street, people chasing each other. The next day, someone would knock on the door. "I'm here to install your cable from a new company." And there was a kind of territorial battle all across the neighborhoods. Now I come back, I look out my window, and I see the metro and the flyovers, and I'm reminded just how much progress has unfolded since that time. But one of the reasons I really loved it out here and love coming back is because of the connection between the political economies of India and the constitutions of India and the United States. Both of the founders of our countries, the groups of men mostly, who wrote these constitutions, had in mind development in an open system, development that might sometimes be slowed down by argument, by conflict, by openness. And they trusted that there would be a series of checks and sources of transparency in this constitutional system that would include the press. And as someone who spent more than 30 years as a professional journalist, enjoyed a lot of privilege and had a lot of good luck. At this point at Columbia, I spend a lot of time reflecting on what it is that makes journalism credible in a constitutional system. How does it renew its place in the system that the founders of both of these countries imagined? And I want to talk a little bit about that in the time that I have today. I want to start by telling a story about another editor. At Columbia, I come to work every day aware that the school that I'm stewarding and the prizes that are administered down the hall were created by a man named Joseph Pulitzer, whose name and whose commitment to excellence in journalism is now well known around the world. But what's not very well known is who Joseph Pulitzer actually was and how it was he ended up with this vision of fact-based professional journalism that he endowed in this school at Columbia more than 100 years ago. So let me just tell you his story, because like Vinod Mehta, it's not the story of a man from the elite, it's not the story of a man with heirs, it's a story of a journey, which is often a part of a journalist's life, and of a discovery late in life of certain values and principles that ended up becoming very influential in the United States. So Joseph Pulitzer was born in Hungary in 1847. His family was well off when he was a young man. He was tutored in German and French, but his brothers died one after another. His parents died. He found himself all alone as he was coming of age. And it turned out that he answered a newspaper ad that was related to the American Civil War. So late in the Civil War, President Lincoln imposed conscription, a draft, because the toll of the war and the political controversies building in the Union in the North were making it difficult to bring enough volunteers to the fight. So he imposed a draft, but with a catch to prevent uprisings. The catch was you could pay someone to substitute for your conscription. So wealthy families in New York started taking out advertisements in Europe looking for mercenaries to come in and serve in place of their sons. And when Joseph Pulitzer, at 19 or 20, bereft of most of his family, looked in the newspaper, he saw an ad, and he decided to sign up. So he went to New York, speaking only German and French, no English. And he found another group of mercenaries who had also answered these ads. They were all German-speaking. They formed a cavalry unit on horseback in 1864, toward the end of the war. They ended up fighting in the Shenandoah Valley, just to the southwest of Washington, D.C., quite close to the Capitol. For a year, they rode up and down the valley all together on horseback, speaking German to Virginians. They didn't get into much of a fight. The war ended, and they were all mustered out and told, well, now you're Americans. So, if you wish to be. And Pulitzer still didn't speak much English, and he heard that in St. Louis there was a German-speaking community. So he went west to St. Louis, great city on the Mississippi River, and he found a community of politics and journalism that attracted him. And at that time, journalism in the United States, as in many parts of the world, still today, was very partisan. It was really an arm of political parties and an expression of political competition. And of course, this was the frontier, this was the West in the United States, so it was not often polite competition. The principal battle then, as now, was between the Democratic and the Republican parties. The Republicans in St. Louis were seen as the Northern Aggression Party. The Democrats were seen as a more local party. Pulitzer became a Democrat. He bought a newspaper called the St. Louis Post that ended up lasting for quite a long time, still published today, though in diminished form. And he became an investigative reporter. He learned enough English to edit a paper in English, and he started attacking graft and corruption that he saw in local officials, of course, almost always in Republican local officials, because he was a Democrat running for office, and all of his friends were Democrats. But he found the Republican opponents that he was competing with to be utterly corrupt and needed to be exposed. So week after week, he would publish these deep investigations of their conflicts of interest, their payoffs, their bribery. And one day, a subject of one of his stories became aggravated that he had been exposed in this way. He didn't believe the story was accurate. That sometimes happens in journalism. And he marched over to the offices of the St. Louis Post, and he pushed past the receptionist, and he demanded to see the editor. And Joseph Pulitzer came out of his office, and they fell into a very heated argument about the accuracy of this investigative story. And at the end of the argument, Pulitzer pulled out a pistol and shot the man. He shot him in the leg, actually. Now, this is the founder of the Pulitzer Prizes, just to give you a sense that there was a little bit of rough and tumble in journalism in St. Louis at that time. This being the West, he was not actually jailed for shooting the man. He was fined, and his friends pulled some money together and paid off the fine. It later became a subject that kind of hung over his head as he made his fortune. So after some time, and not just to escape this shooting charge, he moved to New York, and he bought a newspaper that became the greatest newspaper of its age in New York, the most financially successful, the most innovative, and that made his fortune and put him in the position to endow Columbia Journalism School and the Pulitzer Prizes. And that paper was called The New York World. It's not much remembered. It went out of business in the mid-20th century. But at the peak of its power, between, say, 1880 and 1915, It was a remarkable paper, not just because it dominated New York circulation and the New York press scene, but also because of its innovations. It was the first paper to print color comics. It emphasized illustrations. It was a paper with a populist streak that favored the new immigrants arriving in the country over the old established elites. It had a popular tone, but also a kind of rigor about its reports that ended up influencing Pulitzer. I think if you'd read the New York World in 1895, you would not have predicted that Joseph Pulitzer would have become one of the most influential intellectual patrons of fact-based journalism. But as he reached the end of his life, he became very reflective about what journalism was in a democratic society, in a constitutional society. He was in some suffering toward the last years of his life. He was blind. He was very sensitive to noise. He spent a lot of time by himself. And eventually he pulled together some ideas about the future of journalism that turned out to be remarkably prescient, not just in the United States, but in many other countries influenced by Anglo-American traditions. He pulled these ideas together and he wrote them up in an essay in a magazine called the North American Review in 1904. And if you ever come and visit Columbia University and come to the journalism school, you'll see a few quotations from that essay on our walls, because what Pulitzer did long before people talked about journalism as a function of a constitutional society, long before people thought of journalists as professionals, before they thought of them as a profession that required ethics, that required a commitment to truth-seeking, that required reliance on scientific method and facts. None of this was true about journalism in 1904, but in this essay, Pulitzer sketched out a vision of how it might come into being and why it was necessary for the health of the Republic of the United States. And the main argument that he made was that journalism could become a profession alongside law and medicine and accounting and other professions that were emerging at that time, and that if it did, it could inform the public, hold powerful individuals and institutions to account, and essentially play the role that the writers of the American Constitution imagined the press could play, which would be to strengthen the public square, to strengthen civil society, to strengthen the electorate, and to provide, along with the judiciary, a check on powerful institutions, politicians, and corporations. But he wondered whether this vision that he sketched out so articulately in this essay would come to bear or not. And he kept asking these questions in the essay, whether 70 years from now, I don't know why he chose that time frame, but he said, well, 70 years from now, shall we preserve the government of the Constitution, the equality of all citizens before the law, and the purity of justice, or shall we have the government of either money or the mob? And he went on to say, I don't really know whether this vision I'm offering will be taken up. I'm not even sure if Columbia University will accept my endowment. In fact, Harvard turned him down, and for a long while Columbia was reluctant to establish a leading school of journalism because they weren't sure that journalism was worthy of a university. Well, it happened in the end that Columbia accepted his vision, was actually moved by his vision, and it happened in the end that journalism evolved gradually from a rather unruly, sensationalist, populist profession into one that also included very serious, public-minded institutions like Outlook, like the New York Times, like the Washington Post. And the irony that I hadn't reflected on before I went back to reread this essay in preparation for tonight is that exactly 70 years after that essay was published, right, 1904, what happened in the United States in 1974? It's the summer Richard Nixon resigned because of reporting in the Washington Post by a couple of professional journalists, one of whom, Bob Woodward, was as well educated and well prepared for professional life as any public servant in the United States, Yale University, United States Navy officer, and then he decided to become a reporter, and it was because he was equipped with the professional skills, the education, the sensibility to follow the money all the way to the end, he was able to expose one of the most abusive administrations that the United States has had to endure, but through constitutional means contributed to its end. So I think what Pulitzer understood and what he really outlined for our profession was that the rights contemplated in constitutional systems for the press are inseparable from the other rights that were contemplated at the same time. The press is not a special category of civil right or of empowerment of the people to hold and govern their own institutions, to hold their own institutions accountable. It is part of a system that includes the judiciary, independent prosecutors, public opinion, elections. And we see this now in the United States. I want to come back to the subject of Donald Trump. I imagine one or two of you might be interested in some thoughts on that. I must say, I'm rather tired of talking about our president. He's been in office for 7 months. To some of us, it does feel like 7 years. But there's something happening in the constitutional functioning of the United States in these 7 years, including the press, that I think is worth reflecting on in light of this idea that Pulitzer offered and which many of us now take for granted, that journalism has a role to play in an open constitutional system. So one of the questions, though, before we come back to that I wanted to embrace is one that you hear a lot in a journalism school, and I'm sure when you talk about India's media. How is it that this public-minded, public-interested function of journalism, this constitutional function of transparency, investigative reporting, speaking truth to power, creating fora for diverse opinions, unpopular opinions, how is that supposed to coexist with sensationalist, irresponsible, noisy, if not fake news, distorted news, amateur reporting, a lot of shouting on television? How is it that we're supposed to understand the responsible role of the press when so much of the media is transparently populist at best, irresponsible at worst? And I just think from a journalist perspective, it's important to say, as Vinod Mehta understood, and it's in his memoirs, the serious press has always existed alongside the popular press. This has been true from the beginning of pamphleteering and argument and the printing press. It was true at the time Joseph Pulitzer started to reflect on what a professional press could become, and it's true today. And there are different kinds of failure or sensationalism or popular strategy in media that I just want to inventory briefly before we talk about this larger subject of fake news, because I think it's important, first of all, to say that there has always been a popular press alongside a serious press, and secondly, that the character of the popular press is not always threatening to the health of our democracy. It may be irritating, it may be noisy, but not all of the popular press is a threat to the health of our public square. All of us in the United States, I'm sure many of you have visited there. You might even have once in a while gone to a grocery store, and as you were checking out, noticed the tabloids alongside the cash register, the National Enquirer, and the others. I went back and pulled out some headlines to remind myself of what you used to see when you checked out. Hillary Clinton adopts alien baby, and it had like an official photo of her holding like something from E.T., the movie. Now, you could find a dozen of those headlines on any grocery stand in the United States for the last 40 or 50 years. Are we to believe that the people who bought those newspapers actually credited the truth of these stories? Of course not. There's always a certain amount of sensational journalism that is designed to be entertainment, and there's a sort of agreement of suspension of disbelief between publisher and audience around the entertaining function of that kind of journalism. Where it becomes dangerous is where it becomes propaganda. And there is a difference between, I want to argue, between sensational entertainment and deliberate propaganda. We don't want to detain ourselves with a political science argument about exactly where to draw the line, but I think it's a place to begin, is that a propaganda campaign is designed to manipulate public opinion or to manipulate political outcomes. And what's happening to media today in the digital world, both in the United States and in India, is that the line between popular entertainment, sensational, flawed, but acceptably free journalism, and outright propaganda is blurring. And it's also difficult to distinguish because so much of the undertaking of this work is being done through automation, through algorithms, through bots, and in spaces that are very, very difficult for readers to see or to assess or to judge. I don't believe this problem is going to get better anytime soon. I think we're in for a period of deliberately manufactured propaganda campaigns, sometimes within countries, sometimes offshore. And we're likely to be in a period where the technology associated with those campaigns is going to be more sophisticated than the audience's ability to discern what is going on, or even to distinguish a credible from an incredible source. So we've moved way beyond the Hillary Clinton alien baby headlines. We're in a dangerous moment. Now, what do we do about it? We started with these constitutional systems that were based on the primacy of openness, that we're willing to accept a certain penalty for the amount of argument we have, for the amount of conflicts we endure, for the diversity of voices that we privilege. If we face propaganda campaigns that are truly dangerous to the health of our democratic system, are we meant to shut them down? If we do that, how much other speech will we suppress? And what is the mechanism by which we empower either a company like Facebook or a government to distinguish between propaganda and legitimate speech? It's a very difficult question to answer in a way that would give you any confidence in such a regime. You're almost certainly going to move very quickly into a form of censorship. Now, certainly there have always been kinds of speech, even in the radical First Amendment society of the United States, which is by far the most permissive of these open society regimes, there's always been certain kinds of speech that has been qualified for privilege. Speech that incites violence, speech that mobilizes hatred. Although the bar for stopping such speech in the United States is high, there is a bar, and it's similar to the kinds of restrictions that you would find in Europe or indeed in India. But setting violent incitement to violence aside, we're talking about a different problem of manipulated news, manipulated public opinion, propaganda campaigns. If we try to shut those down on principles similar to the prohibitions against inciting violence, we're very quickly going to be shutting down lots of other speech at the same time. There's something glorious about a society that is informed by truly free speech, even nutty, irresponsible speech. In the United States today, I'm sure you see when you visit, some of the best news and even some of the best investigative reporting is being created by satirists. The Onion, John Oliver's show on HBO. Sometimes it's very difficult to tell whether an Onion headline is an Onion headline or a New York Times headline. I went and pulled together 5 or 6 of them, and here's one. I would defy you, if you were reading this, visiting New York, to immediately recognize whether it was the New York Times or the Onion. It says, Trump blasts critics who judge neo-Nazi groups by most extreme members. So the claim journalism makes on credibility in a democratic constitutional system doesn't lie around the capacity for that system to provide space for free speech. There's something else going on in the editorial decision-making of Outlook and in the claims that professional journalism make on constitutional privilege. And that is a journalism based on facts, a journalism based on impartiality, a kind of scientific method, fairness, truth-seeking, no matter how imperfect such a pursuit must inevitably be, given our human limitations. So we take this idea of fact-based journalism for granted, and our colleague, our sponsor, or the chief executive used that term, I think, fact-based journalism, credible journalism. We take it for granted, but we have to recognize that this is actually, in the history of arts and letters and journalism in the last 4 or 5 centuries, this is an unusual tradition to have journalism that is devoted to the scientific method. And it's also a distinctively Anglo-American tradition. It came out of the search for evidence in courtrooms in, say, 17th century Britain. It came out of the need in commerce-based capitalist societies for accurate information about shipping, when things were coming and going, what prices were. In the American tradition, the transition from partisanship to fact-based press happened out of technology, happened out of market incentives. When the telegraph was invented, somebody made a business out of transmitting news quickly around the country to newspapers that were like the one Joseph Pulitzer ran. They were in gun battles over partisan disagreements, but they all needed access to the same facts at the same time, so the wire services developed this neutral, very careful, very accuracy-based system of delivering the basics for everyone to argue about. This Anglo-American idea of professional journalism that was related to the scientific method was passed through to countries like India that then converted it into their own nationalist press, their own independence movement press. And so this tradition has spread far beyond the Anglo-American origins, but it's not common. It's not part of the history of journalism in France or Italy or many other places that have had journalism, professional journalism, for a long time. So the first thing to say about this idea that we're all taking for granted is that it's unusual. It's also young. In the United States, the press enjoys privileges and protections unlike in any other country. But even though the First Amendment is more than 2 centuries old, the protections that journalists at the Washington Post or at the New York Times enjoy, and which President Trump has been attacking rhetorically, at least so far, really only date to the 1960s. The reason the United States journalism enjoys such unusual protections is because of a libel law case that was settled in 1964, because of the Pentagon Papers case that occurred in 1971. If you look back at jurisprudence, even in the 1920s, the United States was putting presidential candidates in jail for suggesting that people avoid the draft. A socialist candidate for the presidency was put in jail during the First World War for that very reason. So the First Amendment did not contemplate this kind of space for journalism until very recently, and that to me says, in the long arc of history, it's fragile. This is not a deep 200-year commitment to the role of fact-based journalism in the public square. This is a really young regime that has yet to be as fully tested as many other parts of the Constitution have been. Now, the other thing that's put pressure on these protections and the role of journalism, the aspirations of Outlook, we also heard from our colleagues. The business has changed because of the digital revolution. Magazines and newspapers that enjoyed the stability to pursue this kind of journalism don't have the economic independence and stability that they enjoyed 30 or 40 years ago. The digital revolution has opened publishing to everyone, and out of that revolution has come a media that is increasingly tribalized. You see this in the United States. People tune in to the cable network or read the news outlets that confirm the opinions they already hold in a society that's increasingly polarized. You may find some of this in your own country. This has sprung up and intensified over the last 5 or 6 years. So why is this happening? Why do we see this movement from media that used to be inclusive, even if there was a center-left strategy or an identifiable positioning that media took? That has really intensified, certainly in my country, so that organizations like the New York Times that used to see themselves as published for everyone are now seen as very specifically ideological. Even though the editors and the reporters may not see themselves that way, the reality is that their audiences do. So I think there are 3 or 4 things that have made media become tribalized. And I imagine that some of them are relevant here. First, underlying polarization in our politics. The United States is more polarized today, objectively more polarized, more divided into like-minded communities that intensively oppose other communities than was true 20 or 30 years ago. Some of this in the United States has happened by migration. People have moved into communities to live next to people who think like them. And this has created pockets of the United States where every presidential election, no matter who's running, is decided by 20 points or more in many, many counties. Because there's no contest there. People have decided for reasons of faith or reasons of belief or reasons of education, social preference, to live next to people like them. And sociologists have shown this has really intensified in the last 20 years. The second thing is just the way our brains work. Scientists now have discovered that we have this property in our brains called cognitive bias. It means that we prefer to hear the emotionally pleasing confirmation of beliefs we already hold to being challenged with facts or assertions that we disagree with. Why do we have this in our brains? Because our survival as a species depended on solidarity, on hanging together. And so our brains are wired to take signals of solidarity and to be emotionally reinforced by them. So one thing you learn as a reporter is if you want to avoid mistakes, you have to learn to get out of this emotionally pleasing loop of confirming what you already think and force yourself to be challenged by possibilities or facts that make you uncomfortable. The other big factor, and I'm sure this is present in the world of Outlook and other media, is that in today's advertising market, in today's circulation market, it's not good enough to be smart, to be reliable, to have breadth. You need what the marketing people call engagement. You need an audience that is passionate. They need to really want to be with you. At the New York Times, subscribers charge, their subscription department charges very high prices. And the reason they receive that engagement is because New York Times readers are passionate about their involvement with the New York Times. They sell insider follow-ons to the subscription so you can hear the reporters talk about their experience as if you're living inside the newsroom. On the other end of the spectrum, you have Fox News, an emotionally charged, very transparently political cable television network, one of the most profitable media companies in the United States, and one of the most valued channels on cable subscriptions, because what cable companies want are viewers who are passionate about at least one of the 500 channels on their set. And cable companies know that if they were to drop Fox News, they would be subject to a political revolution. And that engagement to them is more valuable than the demographics of the audience or any number of other factors that would normally come into play. So you have this self-reinforcing tribalization in addition to the earlier factors that's based on business models. And I can't see that it's going to go away. Now, a more partisan press is not necessarily bad if it's honest, if it's credible, if it's independent of political parties and interested in truth-seeking, if it's not propaganda. This is the tradition in continental Europe. And it was long the tradition in America, as Joseph Pulitzer's story exemplifies. But the problem is that as journalism becomes more ideological, more polarized, it becomes for large sections of the public much less credible. And it's therefore easier for governments to repress it or for corporate owners to manipulate it. And we are witnessing a wave of repression and co-optation of media around the world. 10 or 15 years ago, even in authoritarian societies like China, the space for investigative reporting was really opening up, especially about subjects like corruption or conflict of interest. And journalists, independent journalists, even in places like Egypt and China and Turkey, were really testing boundaries. Today, all of that space is closed back up again. And there are enough reporters in jail in Egypt and Turkey to staff a good-sized newspaper. Now, what about Donald Trump? What kind of a threat does he really pose? First thing you have to understand about him, if you don't already, is his own relationship with the press. He craves the press. He craves media attention. He has always cultivated press attention. That's been the secret to his business success. There was a time when he used to call up the New York Post, pretending to be Donald Press's press agent, to plant stories about Donald Trump he used to call up the New York Post, pretending to be Donald Trump's press agent, in order to plant stories in the New York Post about Donald Trump. He has a sophisticated sense of the press. He loves reporters if they love him. So he's not hostile in some innate way to the institutional role of the media. This is a political strategy that he's seized upon and that he's rolled with. But his words have meaning. And increasingly, they're changing the climate for journalism in the United States in two ways. One, they pose a threat. His rhetoric delegitimizes journalism as a check on his own power, as a legitimate part of our constitutional system. He's appointed an attorney general who's deeply skeptical about these, as I mentioned, young privileges that the press enjoys. And I wouldn't be at all surprised to see a reporter prosecuted for espionage during the Trump administration for collaborating with a source to obtain and publish classified information. The Obama administration started us down this road, and the Trump administration, I imagine, will go further still. Fortunately, most of American press laws are located in the states, but the more this rhetorical environment intensifies, the more likely state legislatures are to change the protections that have been enacted over the last 30 years for journalism. On the other hand, these attacks, often over the top on the press, in my experience over the last 7 or 8 months, have actually strengthened journalism in the United States. They've made clear to many, many reporters what it is they are supposed to do, why they have this constitutional role. And you can see just if you read the New York Times and the Washington Post, it's difficult for anyone in the United States government today to draft an executive order or a proposed change of law and not have it land in a Washington Post reporter's inbox within about 2 or 3 hours. And you can also see that important institutions like the FBI and the Justice Department recognize that the integrity of their own investigations that they're carrying out under great pressure from a president who continually denounces the legitimacy of these investigations, that their own integrity depends on the transparency that a free press provides. These are not leaks without a purpose. The purpose is to make transparent to the full public what's going on and why an independent judiciary should be respected. So what are our solutions? I think we're going to have to take more risks than we have been forced to take to defend a free press with all of its imperfections, with all of its variety, to stand up for those rights even when they're unpopular, and to renew our defense of independent journalism, fact-based journalism, impartial journalism. It's going to be a struggle. You know, the history of our societies, both of our societies, is that the preservation of rights is always a struggle. And these rights are intertwined. If you fail to defend one set of rights, you're likely to see another erode. This is going to be a time of testing. It's remarkable for my generation in the United States because we've never known pressure like this from a government, certainly not since the Nixon administration. I think we're up for it, but I don't want to underestimate how severe these tests are going to be and how much courage they're going to require from journalists to defend their own place in the system and their own credibility under very difficult attacks. And so in the end, what we ultimately need are more and better journalists, independent journalists, committed to the traditions that Vinod Mehta modeled and created at Outlook, and which the magazine continues to follow today. It's been an honor to talk with you about some of these ideas that informed Vinod Mehta's career, and I thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Actually, I wanted to request you to stay back on stage to give away a few awards. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give it up for the one and only Mr. Steve Coll? Well, journalists always seek approval and recognition and praise from fellow journalists, so who else but Mr. Coll to give away and hand over the awards to two of the journalists in our list of achievers. And I think in light of what you just shared, maybe it's very poignant that we are giving away these very awards. So can I request you to come this side? Thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, our first award goes to the author of the best non-fiction work. He's a veteran journalist whose first book, Gita Press and The Making of Hindu India, won him several awards. Known for his insightful reports, he has worked with some of the leading publications in the country. I'd like to announce the award for the author of the best non-fiction work, and it goes to Mr. Akshay Mukul. Congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Mr. Mukul. I know we can do better than that. Thank you. Congratulations once again. Our next award is the Outlook Speakout Award for Best Journalist. He's a veteran journalist who has worked with prestigious newspapers and news agencies. He's a recipient of the World Food Day Award from UN Food and Agricultural Organization and the India Association for Advancement of Science, given in recognition of his work as a farm reporter. He's also authored a book, India's New Capitalists, Caste, Business and Industry in a Modern Nation State. Ladies and gentlemen, this award goes to Mr. Harish Damodaran. Congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Coll, for doing the honors. Thank you so much. Can we give it up for Mr. Coll one more time? Well, the person I'm going to call on stage next is a clinical psychologist by training, but he went beyond his calling to make his mark for an astute political psychologist, social theorist, and he's a critic par excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage the one and only Ashish Nandi, a person who's never minced his words in voicing his opinions and theories, and his critiques of covered subjects as varied as European colonialism, secularism, cosmopolitanism, and even utopia. So I wonder what he's going to share with us today, but please welcome Mr. Nandi.
I've been told to say a few words on Vinod Mehta, whose life and work we are celebrating today in a very creative way. I take this request literally. Few words are few words. I first came in touch with Vinod Mehta when he was, I think, he was the editor of Debonair. And I received a request from him to write on Indira Gandhi. Because I had just before that written a long essay on Mrs. Gandhi, I thought I would write an imaginary interview with her. And I did. It did not please, I think, many, because a section of the interview was about the ouster of Air Marshal Zahir, who was heading the body which supervises civil aviation in India. It is said that he complained to Mrs. Gandhi that her younger son often flew planes wearing slippers or sandals. It is also said that Air Marshal Zahir was removed soon after from his post because of this, his complaint. Mr. Gandhi, yet the younger Mr. Gandhi, Sanjay Gandhi, died only a short while after that in a plane accident. And it is said that he was found wearing sandals. I wrote the imaginary interview around this exchange. I had not met Vinod at that time, but I met him soon after that, here and there. And once he joined Outlook, he gave me a virtually an open invitation to write any time I wanted in his journal. One interesting thing I found out was that that time there were a lot of rumors about who actually owned the different journals and who called the tunes of what is being published in it, and what are the political connections of the sponsors of journals. I was surprised to hear that Vinod had actually met the sponsors, Rahejas, only, he said, only in formal receptions like marriages and other such occasions. Otherwise, the Rahejas never directly took any part in what the publication, what Outlook published or did. I found that fantastic. I said, does it mean it was a kind of wordless partnership? He said, not really, but it was close to it. I must congratulate, if there is anybody from the Raheja family, that wordlessness perhaps was one of the most creative partnership I have heard of in the world of Indian news journalism. Vinod also had a kind of a touch of self-depreciation, which became more prominent when he aged. He became my next-door neighbor at Nizamuddin East, and we used to meet once in a while. I met him less. My wife used to meet him because he went for morning walks, whereas I went for evening walks. So, and this self-depreciation showed in various ways. He called his dog Editor. The dog was named Editor. And I don't know what was editorial about him, but I don't know about Punjabi culture, but in Bengali culture, Vinod's wife was Bengali, and if Sumati is here, she might have told him that having a pet dog named after somebody was a favorite way in Bengal to insult somebody, particularly if he's your enemy. Indeed, I remember the famous case of Sarachandra Chattopadhyay, 20th century's best-known Indian novelist, and Rabindranath Tagore, the poet. Sarachandra named one of his cows Rabindranath. Now, that gave rise to a lot of controversy. I read about this controversy when both Tagore and Sarachandra Chattopadhyay were both dead. Nearly 30 years after the event. But there was still a controversy because Sarachandra has evidently given his alibi. He said, I have called him Rabindranath because he was born on a Sunday, Ravivar. And few were willing to accept that explanation. They felt there was something deeper. But I think, on the whole, Vinod intervened whenever he intervened more and more on the television channels. He was I used to meet him more frequently in television shows, and I found that he never lost his equanimity, and he would always grumble to me how television exchanges were becoming more and more bitter and violent. He never raised his voice and never spoke unless he was requested to speak, a principle which I began to follow. One final word. I started interacting with him when I wrote an imaginary interview. If he was living today, I would have liked to write for him a series of imaginary interviews between the president of the world's most powerful democracy and the prime minister of the world's largest democracy. I am sure the readers would have been enchanted, and I am sure Vinod Mehta would have moderated the exchange, even in the imaginary exchange between the two of them, with his usual finesse. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you so much, sir. I think the evening's warming up, and I'd like to invite on stage a lady who's been an activist for many years, and she set up Seva in 1970, late 70s, 78. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the one and only Miss Ila Bhatt. Honor, ma'am, to hear from you. have worked so much for equality and women's rights, and it would be an honor if you can share your views in just a couple of moments, and I think it'll be an absolute pleasure. I'm sure everyone here would love to hear from her, right? Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Ms. Bhatt.
Friends, this is a total surprise to me that I have to speak. I was sitting in the front, and then I have to give an extempore. And the award that I hope I am going to receive is for speaking out. And I'm not used to speaking, and I'm not also used to speaking out. So, what do I say? If I sum up my life, that is within 3 words. That is women, work, and peace. And I have been working all my life with poor women, self-employed, whom the economists call those who are working in the informal economy of this country, and have been trying to bring visibility, that entire informal sector which is not recognized officially or even recorded in the census of India, that these women or men, working in the informal sector are workers, though they are economically active and contributing to the GDP of the country. And in the case of women, they themselves also do not recognize themselves as worker or as producer or as trader. They just work for their livelihoods. And they happen to be, when I started in 72, they happen to be 89% of the total working population of our country. And from there, my background being Gandhian and of trade union and living in Ahmedabad city, an industrial city, and then learning about the trusteeship, the principle of trusteeship for reconciliation, amongst the conflicts, between the capital and the labor and all that. So, what we tried was to organize them, to unionize them, and bring their visibility. And then next was the voice. So because we were organized, we could then slowly over years, that collective voice was being generated, and then they happen to be more now, visible and voice, and having been able to change certain policies, to bring some new laws, law for home-based workers, laws for those who have been vendors and hawkers, so a legislation for them, right from our country to the ILO. So over a period of time, what I mean to say is that it is their work which has spoken out. So it is a collective voice that has spoken out. And usually, following the Gandhian thinking or Gandhian principles, whatever you say, that it has been more, listening to others and more towards building the collective voice. So when I've been asked, and then lifetime achievement and the award. So lifetime, I still have a long work plan, so why rush? So, though I am 85, but anyway. And then achievement or failure or success or failure, somehow I have not believed, and then along with my colleagues and our members, and because our experience has been that after every achievement there is always there are two failures. We gain something and we lose something, and when we lose, so in our loss also there are some 2 or 3 more opportunities that come up. So it has never been, so it has been balanced, but it has never been the same. And so it has been not, it's not my achievement. It is all my colleagues and members and collective, those who have been in Seva and those who have been not in Seva, all those have created a kind of a collective strength, and that is what has worked, and that work is speaking out what I see. The only, when I said achievement and not achievement, to give one example, I have been often saying that poverty is violence with consent of the society. So when we see, while working with poor women, when we see, and then when we try to fight poverty, so I may say that in my lifetime, I can say that in India the poor have not become poorer. They have not become poorer. So there has been, some increase in the prosperity among the poor working class. However, they have not become poorer, but however they have become, I would say that the vulnerability has far more increased today, even with more income, more productivity. So, but however, that is what has been gained. When I say that poverty is violence with consent of the society, so poverty has been less, but the consent of the society, that has continued, or even it has grown more. So I think that balance is not yet done. And I don't know where to stop or what, or when to stop. But I think that unlike the primary needs of the society, that is, roti kapda makan, though it has been a political slogan, however, those primary needs, unless they are satisfied for everybody, till then I think we have not got a Swaraj. We cannot say that everyone is enjoying the Swaraj. Maybe they are losing bit by bit. So I think this is a very crucial time for us to know our people, and I would say that how do we decentralize? How do we create our own Indian model of development? And how do we, I would say, decentralize power and decentralize resources? At least, so far as our basic needs are concerned, meaning food, clothing, and shelter. And in Seva, I would say that, that is what we have followed, and it has worked. Not so, so successfully, but I think in many ways it has worked. If there were more investments, not only financial, but all kinds of investments have been done. So that is, I don't have to make a final conclusion or of that sort. But the whole struggle of Swaraj is still going on, and I think that's a great joy and feeling of satisfaction. In my life, it has been very, very satisfaction that somehow we have been working towards gaining Swaraj at the individual level, at the society level, and also in terms of environment. So if that is what I can say, and be grateful to whatever has been the recognition that has been given to me. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the Honorable former President of India, Shri Pranab Mukherjee. I'd also like to welcome on stage the Honorable Union Minister of Finance, Defence and Corporate Affairs, Shri Arun Jaitley, the Honorable Chief Minister of Odisha, Shri Naveen Patnaik. I'd also like to welcome on stage Mr. Rajan Raheja, Chairman, Rajan Raheja Group of Companies, and Mr. Rajesh Ramachandran, Chief Editor, Outlook Magazine. Gentlemen, may I please... May I please invite Mr. Ramachandran to give the welcome address. Sir.
It's a matter of great pride and privilege to welcome the Honorable former President of India, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, the country's most important Union Cabinet Minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley, the Chief Minister, or one should say, the turnaround Chief Minister of Odisha, Mr. Naveen Patnaik, and the Chairman of the Rajan Raheja Group of Companies, Mr. Rajan Raheja, to this august assembly. As a young reporter covering the Rajya Sabha and also the Congress beat, I have had the opportunity to watch and listen to Mr. Mukherjee very closely. Nobody knew our parliament, its procedures, rules, and conventions as much as Mr. Mukherjee. If anyone wanted to be a model parliamentarian, all she needed to do was to watch Mr. Mukherjee keenly. And as a partyman, as a Congress partyman, he was the repository of all wisdom on Congress party. Its history, its customs, traditions, quirks, possibilities. And later, he was our copybook president, always correct. It's our good fortune that he has agreed to be our chief guest this evening. I welcome you, sir. Now, when we celebrate 70 years of independence, we have among our top national leaders only a very few politicians who have been in jail for speaking out against the government. As a 23-year-old students' leader, Mr. Jaitley spent 19 months in jail for opposing the emergency. And as leader of the opposition from 2009 to 2014, he was the most effective speaker in our parliament. There couldn't be a better choice for the Best Parliamentarian Award. I extend a very warm welcome to you, sir. Odisha is no longer about Kalahandi, Bolanjir, Koraput, or KBK districts, starvation deaths, or miserable poverty. Mr. Naveen Patnaik has achieved what other politicians dream about. He has reduced poverty, increased growth, and like a magician made Odisha, at least in terms of per capita income, more prosperous than West Bengal. The list of his achievements is pretty long. I'll just point out that Odisha, according to Harish Damodaran, is now the 4th largest rice producer and exporter in the country. I welcome you, sir. I welcome Srimati Ila Bhatt, Professor Ashish Nandi, Mr. Anand Kumar, Satyendra Dubey's brother, Mr. Dhananjay Dubey, my friends Harish Damodaran and Akshay Mukul. Outlook magazine is part of the Rajan Raheja group of companies. While we celebrate Vinod Mehta's work as an editor, we also remember the success of Outlook. We also remember that the success of Outlook very much belongs equally to Mr. Rajan Raheja. In fact, while dedicating his book to Mr. Raheja, Vinod called him the prince among proprietors. I welcome you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Welcome to all our dignitaries this evening. It's a very special day, and I'd like to move ahead to the awards presentation ceremony. Our next category of awards will be handed over by the Honorable former President of India, Sri Pranab Mukherjee. Nobody speaks out more, or nobody is expected to speak out more than a parliamentarian. As a custodian of the nation and society, it is the parliamentarian who can take any fight to the highest level and work to ensure results. The person getting this award is the Union Finance Minister, who also holds the additional portfolio of defense. He's a key member of the Narendra Modi government, a seasoned lawyer. The 64-year-old leader is known to be a master strategist of the ruling BJP. As a leader of the opposition from 2009 to 2014, he was undoubtedly the best, the most studied, and the most sought-after voice in Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, the award for Outlook Speakout Best Parliamentarian goes to Honourable Union Minister for Finance, Defence and Corporate Affairs, Shri Arun Jaitley. May I request Pranab Mukherjee ji to please do the honors. The next category, which is Best Administrator. This category honors the contribution of an individual administrator who has turned around the state, and there cannot be any doubt about the winner. As the Chief Minister of Odisha, he has helped his state climb out of extreme poverty and to become a more prosperous state in terms of per capita income, even more than West Bengal. His work in cyclone prediction, warning and mitigation has been stupendous. So, ladies and gentlemen, the winner of the Outlook Speakout Best Administrator is Honourable Chief Minister of Odisha, Sri Naveen Patnaik. Ladies and gentlemen, we move on to a category that honors the outstanding as well as continued contributions in any field of work by any single individual. This category that I'm talking about is that of the Vinod Mehta Lifetime Achievement Award. And it goes to a very special lady. She's an activist who founded Self-Employment Women's Association, SEVA, in 1972. The 84-year-old Gandhian has been involved in a lifelong mission for issues related to equality of girls and women as well as child marriage. A trained lawyer, she has won numerous national and international awards, including the Padma Bhushan, the Magsaysay Award, and the Right to Livelihood Award. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me put, and make some noise and encouragement and honor this very special lady as she gets this award for the lifetime achievement. Ladies and gentlemen, Srimati Ila Ramesh Bhatt. Congratulations, ma'am, and the ever-graceful Ila Bhatt. Academicians are not feted very often, but the fact is that educators change the society more than anyone else. They spread light of education, they create awareness about the need for development, they impart knowledge and guidance that empowers action. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the next category for Outlook Speakout Best Academician. He's a renowned political psychologist, critic, and social theorist. The former director of the Center for Study of Developing Societies has received the Fukuoka Asian Culture Prize and figured in the list of top 100 public intellectuals poll of the Foreign Policy magazine published by Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for none other than Mr. Ashish Nandi. Congratulations, sir. It was a delight hearing you earlier. Entrepreneurs are the strength of a developing society. They generate jobs and wealth that in turn help to bring about desired change in society. Our next award is in appreciation of the valuable contribution by our entrepreneurs. This category is the Outlook Speakout Socially Conscious Entrepreneur. And it goes to a person who's been responsible for guiding Wipro through 4 decades to help it emerge as a global software giant. At present, a net worth of 18.2 billion, this 72-year-old tycoon is a well-known philanthropist who has agreed to give half of his wealth for charity and pledged billions of rupees to the Azim Premji Foundation for work in the field of education. So, ladies and gentlemen, the award for our socially conscious entrepreneur goes to Azim Premji. And on behalf of Mr. Premji, Mr. Parminder Singh is here to receive the award. Someone said, activism is the price I pay for living on this planet. A social activist understands the need for constant action to bring about change and development. He or she harnesses positive energies from all quarters and translates them into action on ground. So, ladies and gentlemen, our next Outlook Speak Out Award is for the category Best Social Activist. And it goes to a Patna-based mathematician who has earned worldwide acclaim for setting up a Super 30, a pioneering coaching institute that grooms students from underprivileged sections for admission into the prestigious IIT institutes. Now, a Bollywood biopic starring Hrithik Roshan in the lead role is also being made on him. So ladies and gentlemen, this award goes to Mr. Anand Kumar. Congratulations, and what wonderful work. They say artists are the conscience of a society. Society is their workshop and also their raw material for their artistic endeavors. It's no wonder that their work mirrors the good and evils of society. And artists will always be one of the first to stand up for the society and raise voice against injustice. And our next category is in honor of these very special and talented people. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Best Artist category. It goes to a gentleman who's a renowned playwright and theatre director, is one of the leading lights of the Theatre of Roots movement, which began in the 70s. The 69-year-old, also known as Thiam Nimai, is known for writing and staging plays based on ancient Indian theatre traditions and forms in the modern context. The venerated theatre guru is at present chairperson of the prestigious National School of Drama, and the award for the best artist goes to Mr. Ratan Thiam. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Thiam. Presenting our final category of the evening, and this category is in honor of those select few who went beyond their individual calling to speak out against the wrongdoings that they saw. They faced trials and tribulations and often direct threats to their lives. But these courageous few dared to bring out the truth and make a difference. This evening's last award is in honor of the whistleblower. An IIT Kanpur graduate joined the Indian Engineering Service only to unearth rampant corruption in the Golden Quadrilateral project of the National Highway Authority of India during his posting as project director at Koderma. He sought to highlight it through a letter to the Prime Minister's office, but got killed soon thereafter by his contract mafia at Gaya in his home state in Bihar in 2003. He was only 30 years old then. Ladies and gentlemen, the Whistleblower Award goes to the late Mr. Satyendra Dubey, and on behalf of the late Mr. Dubey, his brother Dhananjay is here to receive the award. I think it's the highest price to pay, and his memory deserves a better applause than the one that we are giving right now. Thank you. Thank you, sir, for doing the honors. May I now invite the Honorable Chief Minister of Odisha, Shri Naveen Patnaik, to come on the podium and please say a few words.
Honorable Shri Pranab Mukherjee ji, Honorable Shri Arun Jaitley ji, distinguished awardees of this evening's function, members of the Outlook team, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express my deep gratitude to the Outlook team for having awarded me this prestigious award of Best Administrator. I would like to dedicate this award to the 4.5 crore people of Odisha. When I first became Chief Minister in the year 2000, Odisha was importing rice. Today, we are the third largest contributors to the public distribution system in this country. In the last 10 years, we have doubled the incomes of our farmers. And also, we have lifted 8 million of our people above the poverty line. We have concentrated on the welfare of women and our tribals. As far as women's empowerment and economic development is concerned, we now have 5 million self-help groups, women's self-help groups, which is our Mission Shakti initiative for their development. As far as infant mortality is concerned, we held the lowest statistics in the country. Today we are well above the national average, and we save up to 50,000 babies' lives every year. In the year 1999, a horrifying super cyclone took place in Odisha, where 30,000 lives were lost. We have, in the last 4 years, through our disaster management initiatives, come to a zero tolerance as far as human lives are concerned, and no human lives were destroyed in Cyclone Phylon. We have always endeavored to make more and more efforts for our state, which we hope one day that Odisha will be the leading state in the country as far as welfare and development is concerned. I would like to thank the Outlook Group for the award again, and also to congratulate the other distinguished awardees. Thank you very much indeed. Namaskar. Bande Utkal Janani.
Thank you so much, sir. I'd now like to invite the Honourable Union Minister for Finance, Defence and Corporate Affairs, Sri Arun Jaitley, to deliver the keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Arun Jaitley.
The Honourable Shri Pranab Mukherjee, the Honourable Chief Minister of Odisha, Naveen Babu, Mr. Ahija, Mr. Rajesh Ramachandran, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Rajesh, for having invited me to be associated with this program that you've organized today to honor a large number of people who made contribution in different fields. I assume that you also had to get somebody from politics, and since I was here, you thought that I could fit into that slot. Thank you very much nonetheless for that. Just a word about the outlook. I've always believed that, and I've been telling Rajesh whenever he's met me, that magazine journalism in India is today probably the most difficult one. Difficult because thanks to technology, the definition of news itself has changed. News these days is really what the camera is able to capture, or alternatively even faster, what the digital media is able to get attracted to. And therefore, print journalism in terms of both technology and timing faces that radical challenge. Even for daily newspapers, one really can't read in the newspaper what one has seen several times over on television the previous evening. Already read it on your smartphones. And therefore the newspapers themselves have a challenge being published at a 24-hour gap as to decide whether to repeat what people already know or to find out something which is entirely different. And for somebody who hits the market every 7 days, I think the challenge becomes even stronger. You could have analysis in magazines, but that analysis is now available either in the electronic media or on the digital media. You could have a lot of gossip in the magazines, but that's also now abundantly available by the minute on the digital media. And therefore, to search that new identity for itself, I think is one of the greatest challenges, and the fact that India continues to be amongst the few societies in the world where magazine journalism, both in English and also various other languages, manages to sustain itself, is a great tribute to the journalists who work there, that they keep the reader's interest alive in somewhat a very challenging environment. Just a few words about the context which you mentioned in terms of, while giving the comment on Indian Parliament and what we do there. I think Parliament still remains in India one of the greatest institutions which suits this country. It's an institution where almost every representative, different shades of political ideology, different regions, different people with different religious, cultural backgrounds, different languages, with very different interests, all assemble in two different houses and then become a part of that collective decision-making process which is Indian Parliament. And therefore, in a diverse country like India, a forum of this kind, which is bicameral, where almost every shade of every voice is represented, actually has enabled over the last 7 decades a very large involvement of different sections of people itself. They come there as members of political parties or as representative of states, and I think it's served Indian democracy well. Of course, the character is changing because the character of polity itself is changing. There was a time where Indian Parliament had essentially serious debates. Ministers were grilled, the nation found out information through some great stalwarts in the opposition benches or in Parliament as an institution itself. But of late, of course, you will have your usual bit of noise, disturbances. But then one of the greatest flexibilities of Indian Parliament is that after that noise, it starts functioning, and by and large, it is able to deliver substantially on the agenda which is assigned to it. And I think one important yardstick, if you look at from 1991 when the economic reforms process started, despite all these challenges in the parliamentary functioning that we have, as I look back today, I can't recollect a single major legislation in terms of reform. Some got delayed, but nothing was ever held up. And therefore, the process of discussion, the process of disturbance, discussion, meetings, committees, parliamentary committees, eventually enables a consensus to develop. And when legislations, even very complicated ones, are passed, it normally gets passed through a process of consensus itself. About speaking in Parliament and debates in Parliament, I have a very interesting observation if I look back to my own stay. My very first or second day in Parliament, I was asked to speak on something and I spoke a little aggressively. And after I finished speaking, Mr. Advani took me aside and said, I have one suggestion to give you. Concentrate on issues, never on persons, when you speak in Parliament. And I think all those who followed that broad principle have been able to stay out of personal acrimony, have been able to stay out of a system where their own speeches get disturbed. And I mentioned this in an article that I wrote on Pranab Babu the day he relinquished office at the President, that his was an extremely telling parliamentary career which Rajesh referred to. I was a beginner, but I, as a beginner, became a minister, and he was occupying the front benches of the opposition in the upper house. But whether in the opposition or in the government, when he spoke, he discarded the political party cap that he wore and always phrased his arguments in a manner that the argument was substantially non-partisan in character. And I described him in an article that I wrote on him, that he eventually came out as almost an amicus curiae speaker who was speaking for the whole house or who was speaking for the country and therefore wanted the whole parliamentary consensus to stand behind him. And I think it was this particular approach which makes decision-making in Parliament and makes your own acceptability in Parliament a lot easier. Now, this whole debate on excessive number of disturbances in Parliament will go on. When we are in opposition, we all say, well, that's one of the last resorts we have to resort to, and when we are in government, we say this is not the right thing to do. But eventually, it's always a debate between a disturbance, adjournment, then meetings, then consensus, then sitting till late in the evening, at times producing a very high-quality debate. And one of the greatest tributes to Parliament then would be that when you have that high-quality debate, you find news channels even stopping their 9 o'clock acrimonious debates and switching over live and showing you what Parliament has been discussing. And that's a tribute to the quality of the debate that takes place in those parliaments. And that's the system which we live in. And I think at the end of the day, if I look back, and I'm sure we'll have the benefit of Pranab Babu's views also in this, there is no other system which is better suited for India. There is no other system that can produce the most aggressive aspect of your personality, at the same time the next minute bring about the biggest conciliator in you, which is more suitable for India, and which then becomes a process of a decision-making for the larger interests of the country that it takes place. I must tell you that if you look back some of the recent last few months, you had years and years of debates, for example, on the GST. But the Constitution Amendment, 6 legislations by the centre, 1 legislation by each of the states, eventually after that consensus and acrimony passed unanimously. A contentious law like the Insolvency Code recently passed unanimously. So at the end of the day, it's a forum which, despite its song and dance and noise, is certainly able to bring about a larger consensus and bring varied shades of ideology itself together. And I think as Indian democracy moves on, I don't see the noise in Parliament coming down, but I still feel it will remain probably one of the most relevant institutions as far as India is concerned. Thank you once again, Rajesh, and your entire team for having invited me.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to take this opportunity to now invite our chief guest, the Honourable former President of India, Sri Pranab Mukherjee, to please come and say a few words.
Good evening, Sri Arun Jaitley, Distinguished Finance Minister and Defence Minister of India, Sri Naveen Patnaik, Chief Minister of Odisha, Sri Rajan Raheja, Chairman Raheja Group, Sri Rajesh Ramachandran, Editor-in-Chief, Outlook, distinguished awardees, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a proud privilege for me to have the opportunity of handing over awards to some of the most distinguished sons and daughters of this great nation. When I was handing over these awards as the recognition of their contributions in various domains chosen by them, their lifelong commitment, dedication, and hard work, which brought them to be recognized by Outlook group of magazines and to present them this national recognition. Many years ago, I think almost 90 years ago, Rabindranath Tagore, as Arun mentioned to me more than often, I used to refer to Tagore's in my parliamentary speech and thereafter also. While giving awards and recognizing somebody, he made this observation on his 70th birth anniversary, when citizens of Calcutta honored him. By that time, he has received Nobel Prize, as recognized all over the world as intellectual giant, talking of humanity, spreading the message of universal love, affection, transcending the boundaries of territories, languages, and races. He stated that there is a need of recognizing. Recognition is needed to encourage the creative mind to contribute more, to create more, to give more to the society. Today we had the privilege of honoring certain people whose contributions need not speak of. Being in public life, particularly in governance of this country and in Parliament, for some time, not as long as the last year's predecessors and even contemporaries like Atal Bihari Vajpayee or L.K. Advani, both of them, will have more years in Parliament than I spent. But I had the privilege of working with Arun, both as he is too junior, because when I was minister, already a minister in the government of India, he was a student activist, and General Secretary of Delhi University or General Secretary of Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, sometimes in mid-70s. So he is too young compared to my age, and always I used to call him Dear Odu. I saw him as leader of the House. I saw him as leader of the opposition, his performance. In Vajpayeeji's government, when he handled one of the most ticklish issues, that is World Trade Organization, and which are accustomed with the Doha round of talks, which he, after initiated by his predecessor, Mursali Maran, he took it to its logical conclusion and upheld India's advantage in the most competitive trading environment which prevailed then, which is prevailing now, but still the safeguards he provided in Doha round will help India for many more years to come. As Defense Minister, his timely intervention at this point of time, when our border is little bit hot, but I am quite confident the crisis will be diffused, it will not explode itself, because the broad national interest and human interest requires that. Two mighty neighbors and largest population of the world, they must live and let others to live in peace, in harmony, in cooperation, and in understanding of each other. I have no doubt government of the day will steer the situation, and we are confident that it is in the safe hand of a man who is young but wise enough to carry this burden and to protect the interest of the country. Naveen Patnaik, Chief Minister, I know him, if I claim, rather 2 generations, because his father was an icon, like me, to many younger people in their formative years. Because the story of a young man who justly married, and he was ready to sacrifice his life at the call of the nation, and took tremendous risk to save some precious lives, not of India, but outside, in the early days of our national independence. Since then, Biju Babu, Biju Patnaik, and Odisha, development of coding became almost synonymous. As worthy son of this worthy father, Naveen Babu has carried on building up Odisha to take its rightful place amidst the Indian nation. He has this historic responsibility. Once I had the opportunity of visiting his state, and I was in Kalahandi, which more than often appears in the headlines of newspaper or media as the land of starvation, suffering. But that was the land in the days of Guptas, which was known as Mahakantar, which fed not only Odisha, but almost the entire eastern India. It was known as the granary of that part. Name was, of course, it was known as Mahakantar. So he is trying to remove this black spot in the name of the Odisha by eradication of poverty, by enhancing the job opportunities and building of new Odisha, and many others, all of them, those who have been recognized